You know what the hardest part is when you leave a religion that's been a huge part of your life and you've been in your whole life? It's not missing the religion, it's some of the relationships you have to deal with when you go through that. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Comments, love the comments. Tack för sist, välkommen tillbaka. I'm back on the road again. Been working 3 days now. And it's going pretty smooth. Considering I was out for 6 weeks, the back's a little sore, but I think it's okay. I think it's just soreness. Sorry, allergies. Anyway, I'll get right to the topic. So, I've done several videos about leaving the Mormon church, experiences on my Mormon mission, some mistruths about Mormons. And there seems to be a fair bit of interest out there. But I've watched several myself. There's a guy, can't think of his name now, somebody on here mentioned him to me, and he does Mormon stories. It's a pretty big podcast / YouTube channel. I've watched a couple of those and I can kind of relate to all that. But one thing a lot of people, at least that I've seen, don't talk about so much is what happens after you leave. Most of my family was not just my immediate family, my parents, my siblings. My siblings, we all grew up in the Mormon church. And it's really ingrained in you, that Sunday you go here and you do this and you don't do this and you don't do that. And growing up in that, it definitely gets pounded into me is probably the wrong term, because I never felt like my parents were like, you're doing this, it was what we did. But when I left, one of my brothers was already on the way out, although he's kind of an enigma because he still believes in the church. He hasn't been going for 35 years, but he still believes in the church. And sometimes he actually lectures me, which I find funny because he hasn't been to church in 35 years. But so he was kind of on the way out long ago, just because, I won't get into that. He wouldn't want me telling that story, so I'll leave it there. But, I've already gone through the process of leaving and when I left and all that, so I'm not going to rehash that. But one of the things that really can affect you a lot is friends and family that are still in the church. I had a really good friend that I grew up with. I hadn't seen him in years, and this was just probably a couple of years after we left the church. I hadn't seen him in years, but he came on a business trip to Provo, and we got together. We were childhood friends. I met him when I was 5 years old, maybe 6. And, I could still consider him a friend. I haven't seen him in years, but good dude. But he got on me a little bit about it. Why would you leave? Why would you leave the truth? On and on like that, which is very ironic because a couple of years ago, he messaged me that he had left the church, which blew my friggin' mind. I would have never guessed in 1,000 years he would ever leave the church. I thought he would, be the president of the church someday, that kind of dude. He was a bishop when he was 29 years old. If you know what that is, it's a high up position. So I got a little bit of grief from him. Most of my friends, like childhood friends, have either left the church or they're very lukewarm on it. So I didn't get a lot of grief there. My parents, and specifically my dad, had a really hard time with it. He is very devout to this day. He's 83. He's just a good man with a good heart. And he believes with all his heart that it's true, and I've strayed from it. Now, everything's great between my dad and I now. I think he respects my decision. I respect his. We hang out whenever we're together. We go golf. He's just a good dude, and I love him, and, I respect him. But when I first left, he brought it up a lot. I talked to my parents pretty much every week. And he would just kind of, he didn't push hard, but he'd mention it a fair bit. And, I never said much. I just said, it's not for me, kind of thing. You made your choice, Dad. He's told me the story about kind of his conversion, and he had, I can't remember if he said it was a vision. An angel or something came to him and told him the truth would find him, or something to that effect. And like the next day or a couple days later, the Mormon missionaries knocked on his door. So, to him, that was a sign. And if you know much about the Mormon faith, they believe in eternal families, which so do I. I don't think you have to be Mormon to believe that life goes on, and I believe we'll be with our loved ones after this life. My wife, my kids, my parents. But believing that, it was very hard for him because I had kind of left, so I wouldn't be part of that in the next life. My oldest daughter, also, I went to the blessing of one of her children, one of my granddaughters. This was quite a few years ago, and she gave a talk in church. I don't know if you're aware, but in a Mormon church, just everybody gives talks. You'll be called, and they'll usually have a couple of speakers talk for 5, 10, 15 minutes about whatever, Jesus or the Holy Ghost or whatever. But she gave a talk, and she's the most kind, loving person ever. And she was awesome, but I could tell she was talking to me when she's like, I want to be together with my family forever. I was looking for her book because she's an author. She's working on a trilogy. She's got the first 2 books done. I'm about halfway through the first book. Amazing writer. It's young adult fantasy, and I was going to hold it up when I talked about her. I don't know if I left it back in Utah or if I have it with me. I will check. Anyway, the book is called The Secrets of Silver Edge, and her name is Sherston Shirts, like the shirt. Anyway, she gave a little subtle, I could tell it was for me. I want to be with my family forever. I actually have a couple experiences to tell you about when it comes to that. So the first was my dad. So this went on for a few years, just, kind nudging, come back kind of stuff. Nothing harsh, didn't call me names. I just heard the other day about some Mormon guy that, in his 20s left the church, and his parents completely disowned him, which I can't even comprehend that a parent would do that. But, whatever. So yeah, it was hard for her. I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes, I remember. So this went on for a few years with my dad. And he called me one night, and it must have been a Friday or Saturday night. I know I've told the story, but probably all of you haven't heard it. He called me on a Friday or Saturday evening, and we're just talking, having our normal bullshit, and just, we talk like we're friends now. And he started pushing a little bit, and I'd probably had 3 or 4 beers. And I just didn't say much, and I finally had enough. And not in a mean way, but in a very stern way, I told my dad, I said, Dad, you got to make your decision. You decided to be part of this church. I had no say in that. Well, you chose when you're 8. No, you don't choose when you're 8. You just can't. So it's only fair that I get to choose my way now. And this is what's right for me and my family. And I'm closer to my wife after leaving the church than I was when I was part of it. There's 100 different reasons. I have nothing against religion, unless it's a religion that hurts people. Then I have no use for it, and I hope it goes away. If you're part of, anyway, as long as religion doesn't hurt anybody, I got no problem with it. But yeah, I kind of laid down the law there, and it actually made our relationship even better, because after that, I think he realized I've made my choice. This is what I'm doing with my life and my family, and you need to accept it, because it's not your choice. And my relationship with my dad is fantastic. He's just a good dude. I wanted to tell one other brief story kind of along these lines before I sign off. So if you know what home teachers are, and I don't think they call them that anymore, but if you're a member of the Mormon church, you get visitors once a month. It's usually a couple of dudes, or, if it's women visiting, then it's 2 women. And they're the Relief Society, and the men are the priesthood. Anyway, a neighbor of ours was assigned to be our home teacher when we moved into our house 21 years ago. Nice dude. He had a Norwegian background, Norwegian name, so we kind of got along. Him and his wife really wanted to be buddies with us. We weren't really interested in that. We were very different people. Something on my shirt. But he was pleasant enough, and he was persistent. I told him right at the beginning, you're not going to come pray, you're not going to preach to me. But if you want to just visit and, neighbors, friends, cool. And that went on for a few years. He would do subtle pushing, but it was never too much for me. There were a few times when he would have like his whole family with him, and it would get a little aggressive, like his wife stuck her foot in the door a couple times to stop it from closing. They're nice people, but it kind of got where I was like, I'm kind of done with this. And he showed up one day by himself, and we're talking in the driveway, and a little dude too. I'm not huge, but I'm 5'10", 210 pounds. This guy is probably 5'7", 135 pounds, soaking wet. And he was standing in the driveway, and he was kind of down from me anyway, so I was way above him. And he looked at me very seriously, because he was trying to hint at having a religious discussion. He looked at me really serious, and he said, "Arnold, don't you love your family?" I said, "What did you just say to me?" "Don't you love your family? Don't you want to be with them?" And I says, "Be very careful. You're treading on, troubled waters here." He says, "Well, you can't be together for eternity if you're not in the church." And my reaction was instant and not thought out. But I stepped towards him with anger in my face. I was angry. I wasn't going to do anything to him, but I, just instinctually stepped forward, and he about fell, backing up as fast as he did. And I walked up to him after he stood up all the way. He was like halfway down. He stood up, and I said, "Don't you ever say anything like that about me and my family, or we're going to have a big problem." And he didn't come around again for a few months, but I'll give him credit. He did come back, and I still see him semi-regularly. So yeah, if you are in the process of leaving the church and you're having a hard time with family and friends, if you want to leave a comment, I'll give whatever advice I can. I kind of am an expert. I've been through it, but it's not always the easiest thing. But I'm very happy where I'm at now. I want to do a little video about religion in general. Maybe that'll be my next one, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you're all having a beautiful, what is it? It's Thursday. Hey, it's Friday tomorrow. Might have to have myself a few drinks tomorrow night and do a video. But hope you have a blessed night, blessed week. Be nice to everybody. You never know what anybody's going through. Unless they're just being a total jerk to you, then just walk away. I won't go into it, but I fixed a cool situation at work today just by being nice. So I hope you all have a beautiful day. Thank you for this time. Tack för denna gången, vi snackas igen snart. Ha det gott. Have a good one, everybody. Peace. Love.